The distress beacon had been silent for 317 years. Admiral Zephyra Kane stood before the massive viewport of the Galactic Council's flagship Meridian's Edge, watching the ancient vessel drift through the asteroid field like a ghost from humanity's forgotten past. The ship before them defied every law of physics she understood. Where it should have been a derelict hulk, twisted metal and frozen corpses, instead hung a pristine monument to human engineering, the colony ship Perseverance, lost during humanity's first desperate exodus from their dying homeworld. "Scans are inconclusive, Admiral," reported Lieutenant Commander Vex Thorne, his scaled reptilian features creased with confusion. "The hull shows no signs of deterioration. Life support appears to be functioning. But there are no life signs aboard." Zephyra's cybernetic eye whirred as it focused on the ship's elegant lines. The Perseverance had been humanity's crown jewel, designed to carry 50,000 colonists to the Kepler system. When Earth's sun began its premature collapse, it had been one of 12 ships that launched in humanity's final hour. 11 had reached their destinations and established thriving colonies. The Perseverance had simply vanished. "Admiral," came the melodic voice of Dr. Lyralei Moon Whisper, the expedition's chief xenobiologist. Her ethereal celestial features glowed softly in the bridge's dim lighting. "The energy readings are unlike anything in our databases. The ship appears to be feeding on the asteroid field's mineral content." Captain Darius Ironhold, the gruff Terran Marine commander, stepped forward. His weathered face bore the scars of a dozen campaigns across the galaxy's frontier worlds. "With respect, Admiral, this feels like a trap. Ships don't just survive 3 centuries in the void and come back looking like they just left space dock." Zephyra nodded slowly. The same thought had been gnawing at her since they'd received the automated probe's transmission. The Perseverance had been detected by a routine mining survey, sitting motionless in an asteroid field that hadn't existed when the ship first disappeared. More troubling still, the field itself seemed to be arranged in perfect geometric patterns around the vessel, as if the asteroids had been deliberately positioned. "Dr. Moon Whisper, what's your assessment of the ship's condition?" Zephyra asked. The Celestial's luminous eyes dimmed with concern. "The hull material has been enhanced somehow. It's still recognizably human alloy, but it's been infused with elements that don't appear on any periodic table. The ship's mass has increased by approximately 40%, yet it shows no signs of structural stress." Engineer Corvin Steelwright, a stocky dwarvish technician whose clan had helped design the original colony ships, ran his thick fingers through his braided beard. "The power signature is all wrong too, Admiral. The Perseverance was equipped with standard fusion reactors. What I'm reading suggests something far more advanced, possibly zero-point energy manipulation." Zephyra felt a chill run down her spine. Zero-point energy was theoretical at best, a concept that existed only in the most advanced physics texts. No known civilization had successfully harnessed it, despite centuries of research by the galaxy's brightest minds. "Sir," interrupted Communications Officer Naya Starweaver, her aquatic features rippling with anxiety. "I'm detecting a transmission from the Perseverance. It's an old Earth standard, but the signal is incredibly strong. Stronger than our own communications array." "Put it through," Zephyra commanded. The bridge fell silent as static filled the air, followed by a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of space itself. It was human, unmistakably so, but there was something else woven into the words, a harmonic resonance that made everyone present feel as though the voice was speaking directly into their minds. "This is Captain Elena Voidheart of the Earth colony ship Perseverance. We have been waiting for you, Admiral Kane. We have been waiting for so very long." The transmission cut to silence, leaving the bridge crew staring at each other in stunned disbelief. Zephyra's blood ran cold. The voice had known her name, her rank. But more than that, there had been something in the tone, not the relief of rescued survivors, but the patient satisfaction of a predator that had finally cornered its prey. "How could they know who we are?" whispered Thorne. Dr. Moonwhisper's glow had dimmed to barely perceptible levels. "Admiral, I'm detecting massive energy buildups throughout the Perseverance. Whatever they've become, they're powering up systems that shouldn't exist." Zephyra stared at the ancient ship, her mind racing through possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. The Perseverance hadn't been lost, it had been transformed. And now, after 3 centuries of silence, it was ready to reveal what humanity could become when pushed beyond the boundaries of known space and time. "All stations, yellow alert," she commanded. "And get me everything we have on the Perseverance's original mission. I have a feeling we're about to discover why some ships should stay lost." The archives painted a picture of desperation that Zephyra had only read about in history texts. As the Meridian's edge maintained its cautious distance from the Perseverance, she reviewed the classified files that had been sealed for over 3 centuries. Dr. Moonwhisper materialized beside her in the Admiral's ready room, her celestial form shimmering with barely contained energy. "The original crew manifest makes for disturbing reading," she said, her voice carrying harmonics of unease. 50,000 colonists, but also something else. A classified cargo manifest that's been redacted beyond recognition. Zephyra pulled up the holographic display, watching as fragments of information flickered before them. "Captain Elena Voidheart," she read aloud. "Decorated officer, veteran of the Titan mining wars. But look at this, she volunteered for experimental neural enhancement procedures just before the launch." "Neural enhancement?" Dr. Moonwhisper's glow intensified. "Admiral, that technology was banned after the Prometheus incident. The test subjects either died or suffered complete psychological breaks." Captain Ironhold entered without ceremony, his heavy boots echoing on the deck plating. "Admiral, my Marines are reporting strange dreams. Started about an hour after we made contact with that ship. They're all having the same dream, walking through corridors filled with whispers in languages they don't recognize." The implication sent ice through Zephyra's veins. Psychic contamination was a known phenomenon around certain alien artifacts, but humans weren't supposed to be capable of projecting such effects. "Get Dr. Corvin up here. I want to know everything about the Perseverance's original specifications." When the dwarvish engineer arrived, his usually steady hands were trembling. "Admiral, I've been going through the technical readouts, and there's something you need to see." He activated his portable holoprojector, displaying the Perseverance's original blueprints. The ship was designed with modular sections that could be jettisoned in case of emergency. But according to these scans, all the modules are still attached, plus several new sections that weren't part of the original design. "New sections?" Zephyra leaned forward. "Aye, and they're not human architecture. The geometric patterns, the material composition, it's like nothing in our databases. But here's the truly unsettling part." Corvin highlighted a section of the ship's hull. "These additions appear to be grown rather than built. The metal has organic properties, almost like it's alive." Lieutenant Commander Thorne's voice crackled over the comm system. "Admiral, you need to get to the bridge immediately. The Perseverance is moving." They rushed to the bridge to find the ancient colony ship slowly rotating, its hull gleaming with an inner light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The asteroid field around it began to shift, the rocks moving in perfect synchronization as if responding to some unheard command. "It's not using conventional propulsion," reported Naya Starweaver from her communications station. "The ship appears to be manipulating local gravitational fields." "Admiral, this technology is centuries beyond anything we possess." Dr. Moonwhisper's readings were off the charts. "The energy signatures are increasing exponentially. Whatever they're doing, it's building towards something significant." Another transmission crackled through the speakers, and once again, Captain Voidheart's voice filled the bridge. But this time, there were other voices layered beneath hers, thousands of them, speaking in perfect unison. "Admiral Kane, we know you're studying us. We know you're afraid. You should be." The voice carried an otherworldly resonance that made the bridge crew's teeth ache. We were like you once, bound by the limitations of flesh and metal, constrained by the narrow vision of what humanity could become. But the void taught us better. The void showed us the truth. What truth? Zephyra found herself asking aloud, though she hadn't intended to respond. That evolution doesn't end with biology, Admiral. That consciousness can transcend the boundaries of individual minds. That a species can become something greater than the sum of its parts. The voice paused, and in that silence, Zephyra could swear she heard the whisper of solar winds across empty space. We are no longer merely human. We are what humanity was always meant to become. The transmission ended, but the Perseverance continued its slow rotation, and with each turn, more of its impossible modifications became visible. Sections of the hull rippled like liquid metal, while other areas pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to respond to some internal rhythm. Admiral, Corvin said quietly, I'm detecting massive structural changes throughout the ship. It's rebuilding itself as we watch. Zephyra stared at the vessel that had once carried humanity's hopes to the stars and had returned as something unrecognizable. Whatever had happened to the Perseverance and its 50,000 souls during those lost centuries, it had transformed them into something that challenged every assumption about the nature of consciousness, evolution, and what it meant to be human. Maintain distance, she ordered. And prepare a full report for the Galactic Council. They need to know that humanity's lost children have come home, and they're not the same species that left. The nightmares began spreading through the Meridian's edge like a plague of consciousness. Zephyra found herself walking through corridors that couldn't exist, following the sound of children singing lullabies in harmonies that human vocal cords couldn't produce. She would wake with the taste of starlight on her tongue and the certainty that something vast and patient was watching her through the darkness between atoms. Dr. Moonwhisper had established a makeshift medical bay in the ship's secondary laboratory, treating crew members who reported increasingly vivid shared dreams. Her celestial physiology made her partially resistant to the psychic emanations, but even she showed signs of strain, her natural luminescence flickering erratically as she worked. The dreams are becoming more coherent, she reported to Zephyra during their morning briefing. The crew members are describing the same locations, the same voices. It's as if the Perseverance is broadcasting memories directly into our minds. Captain Ironhold looked haggard, his scarred face drawn with exhaustion. My Marines are requesting permission to return to their quarters. They're seeing things that aren't there, shadows moving in their peripheral vision, hearing voices calling their names from empty corridors. Engineer Corvin had dark circles under his eyes, but his technical analysis remained sharp. The ship's energy output has increased by 300% since yesterday. It's not just rebuilding itself, it's growing. New sections are appearing every few hours, and the asteroid field is being systematically consumed and integrated into the hull. Zephyra studied the latest scans of the Perseverance. The vessel now bore only a passing resemblance to its original configuration. Organic-looking growths had spread across its surface like metallic coral, while new appendages extended into space like the limbs of some cosmic creature. Most disturbing of all, the ship's mass had doubled, yet it moved through space with impossible grace. Admiral, Naya Starweaver called from her station, her aquatic features rippling with distress. I'm receiving another transmission from the Perseverance. But this time, it's not just Captain Voidheart. There are multiple voices, and they're calling for specific crew members by name. The bridge fell silent as the transmission began. Captain Voidheart's voice was still present, but now it was joined by others, men, women, children, all speaking with the same otherworldly resonance. Lieutenant Commander Thorne, came a voice that sounded like his sister, who had died in the Proxima conflict. We remember you. We remember your pain, your loss, your desperate search for meaning among the stars. Thorne staggered backward, his scaled features pale with shock. That's impossible. Sarah died 15 years ago. Dr. Moonwhisper, continued another voice, this one carrying the harmonic frequencies of her own species. We see your light, child of the celestial reaches. We know the loneliness that drives you to study other forms of consciousness. You seek connection, understanding. We offer both. The celestial scientists glow dim to almost nothing. How do they know these things? Because we are memory made manifest. Captain Voidheart's voice rose above the others. We are the collective consciousness of 50,000 souls who refuse to accept the limitations of individual existence. When our ship was pulled into the void between dimensions, we faced a choice: die as separate beings or evolve into something greater. The transmission shifted, and suddenly the bridge crew could see images, not on their screens, but directly in their minds. They witnessed the Perseverance being drawn into a spatial anomaly, its hull buckling under impossible stresses. They saw the crew's terror transform into wonder as their individual consciousnesses began to merge, their bodies adapting to survive in conditions that should have been instantly fatal. We became one mind with 50,000 perspectives, the collective voice continued. We learned to reshape matter with thought, to navigate dimensions that exist beyond your three-dimensional understanding. We became what humanity was always meant to become, a species unbound by the constraints of flesh and time. Zephyra forced herself to speak, though her voice came out as barely a whisper. What do you want from us? To share the gift, Admiral. To show the galaxy what true evolution looks like. Your species has spread across the stars, but you remain trapped in individual shells of meat and bone. We offer transcendence. The images in their minds intensified, showing the Perseverance's crew as they existed now, beings of living metal and crystallized thought, their consciousness flowing like liquid light through the ship's organic corridors. They were beautiful and terrible, human and utterly alien. The process is painless, the voices whispered in unison. You simply let go of the illusion of separation and embrace the unity that connects all conscious beings. Join us, and you will never know loneliness, fear, or death again. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge crew staring at each other with a mixture of horror and fascination. Zephyra realized that some part of her, a part she didn't want to acknowledge, was tempted by the offer. The promise of connection, of understanding, of never being alone again. Admiral, Corvin said quietly, the ship is moving toward us. Slowly, but it's definitely closing the distance. Zephyra looked at the Perseverance on the main screen, its impossible form pulsing with inner light. Whatever the crew had become, they weren't content to simply exist in isolation. They wanted to spread their transformation, to convert others to their collective consciousness. All hands, red alert, she commanded. Prepare for evasive maneuvers. And someone get me a direct line to Galactic Command. The galaxy needs to know what's coming. The Perseverance moved through space like a living thing, its hull rippling with patterns of light that seemed to respond to thoughts rather than commands. As it drew closer to the meridian's edge, the psychic pressure on Zephyra's crew intensified exponentially. 3 more officers had been sedated after attempting to walk out of airlocks, claiming they could hear their loved ones calling to them from the void. Dr. Moonwhisper worked frantically in her laboratory, trying to develop some form of psychic shielding. Her celestial physiology gave her insights into consciousness manipulation that other species lacked, but even she was struggling against the collective's influence. The emanations aren't random, she explained to Zephyra as they reviewed her findings. They're specifically tailored to each individual psychological profile. The collective is reading our minds, finding our deepest desires and fears, then using them as vectors for conversion. Captain Ironhold had barricaded himself and his remaining Marines in the ship's armory, but even there, they weren't safe from the whispers that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Admiral, his voice crackled over the comm, distorted by interference that shouldn't have been possible. We're losing people. Not to death, to something worse. They're just walking away. Smiling like they've found something we can't understand. Engineer Corvin's latest readings painted an even more disturbing picture. The Perseverance isn't just approaching us, Admiral. It's extending tendrils of some kind, microscopic filaments that are passing through our shields like they don't exist. They're making contact with our hull. Zephyra felt the ship shudder beneath her feet, but it wasn't the vibration of engines or weapons. It was something organic, alive, as if the Meridian's edge itself was beginning to respond to the collective's touch. Through the viewport, she could see the ancient colony ship looming larger, its surface now a writhing mass of metallic flesh that pulsed with the rhythm of a vast heartbeat. Admiral Kane, Captain Voidheart's voice filled the bridge once more, but now it seemed to come from everywhere at once, the walls, the floor, the very air they breathed. You're fighting so hard against something beautiful. We can feel your crew's resistance weakening. Soon, they'll understand what we've learned. Lieutenant Commander Thorne suddenly straightened at his station, his scaled features smoothing into an expression of profound peace. "Admiral," he said, his voice carrying new harmonics, "I can see it now. The connections between all things. The web of consciousness that binds every living being in the galaxy. Why did we ever think we were separate?" "Thorne, report to medical immediately," Zephyra ordered, but the reptilian officer simply smiled. "I'm exactly where I need to be, Admiral. We all are." His eyes had taken on a silver sheen, reflecting light that wasn't present in the bridge's illumination. "The collective isn't our enemy. It's our evolution." Dr. Moonwhisper's reading spiked as she detected the change in Thorne's neural patterns. "Admiral, his brainwaves are synchronizing with the emanations from the Perseverance. He's being integrated into their collective consciousness." "Security to the bridge," Zephyra called, but when the Marines arrived, she could see the same silver gleam beginning to appear in their eyes. The collective's influence was spreading faster than any biological contagion, converting her crew one by one into willing participants in humanity's transformation. "You cannot stop evolution, Admiral," Thorne said, his voice now perfectly synchronized with the collective's harmonic frequency. "We tried to resist at first, just as you are now. But resistance is merely fear of becoming something greater than what we are." Through the ship's sensors, Zephyra watched as sections of the Meridian's edge began to change. The hull plating rippled and flowed, taking on the same organic characteristics as the Perseverance. Her ship was being transformed from within, converted into another node in the collective's growing network. "The process preserves everything that makes you who you are," the voices continued, now speaking through multiple crew members simultaneously. "Your memories, your personality, your individual perspective, all of it becomes part of something infinitely larger. You lose nothing and gain everything." Naya Starweaver turned from her communication station, tears streaming down her aquatic features. But they weren't tears of sorrow, they were tears of joy. "Admiral, I can hear them. All of them. Every consciousness that has ever joined the collective. They're singing, and it's the most beautiful sound in the universe." Zephyra backed toward the emergency command center, her hand hovering over the ship's self-destruct controls. But even as she considered the option, she could feel the collective's influence pressing against her mind like warm water, promising an end to loneliness, to uncertainty, to the crushing weight of individual responsibility. "You've carried the burden of command for so long," Captain Voidheart's voice whispered directly into her thoughts. "Always making decisions that affect thousands of lives, always wondering if you've chosen correctly. Join us, and you'll never have to bear that weight alone again." The temptation was overwhelming. Zephyra could see the appeal of surrendering her individual consciousness to something larger, of becoming part of a collective that would never doubt, never fear, never feel the isolation that came with command. But something deep within her rebelled against the idea, a core of stubborn humanity that refused to be absorbed. "Dr. Moonwhisper," she called to the celestial scientist, who was still fighting the collective's influence through sheer force of will. "The emergency beacon, can you modify it to broadcast a warning to the Galactic Council?" The scientist's glow flickered as she struggled to maintain her individual consciousness. I can try, Admiral. But the collective is so beautiful. So perfect. Why would we want to warn others away from paradise?" Zephyra realized with growing horror that she might be the last unaffected person on her ship. Around her, her crew moved with perfect synchronization, their individual personalities subsumed into the collective's vast consciousness. They looked at her with expressions of infinite compassion, as if she were a child refusing to accept a wonderful gift. "Soon, Admiral," they said in unison, their voices creating harmonies that made the air itself sing. "Soon you'll understand. Soon you'll come home." Zephyra sealed herself in the emergency command center as the collective's influence spread through her ship like a tide of silver consciousness. Through the reinforced viewport, she could see her crew moving through the corridors with eerie synchronization, their faces bearing expressions of transcendent peace that chilled her to the bone. The command center's isolation protocols were holding for now, but she could feel the collective pressing against the barriers, not physically, but mentally, like a vast ocean of consciousness trying to flood a small island of individual thought. Her cybernetic eye flickered with interference patterns as the collective attempted to interface directly with her neural implants. "Dr. Moonwhisper, respond," she called into her communicator, hoping the celestial scientist had found some way to resist the conversion. "I'm here, Admiral," came the reply, though Moonwhisper's voice carried new harmonic undertones. "I'm in Laboratory 7, but I don't know how much longer I can maintain individual consciousness. The collective's song is so beautiful, Zephyra. It would be so easy to just let go." "Fight it," Zephyra commanded. "I need you to modify the emergency beacon. The galaxy has to know what's happening here." Through the ship's internal sensors, she watched as the Meridian's edge continued its transformation. Corridors that had been sterile metal and composite materials now pulsed with organic life. The walls themselves seemed to breathe, and she could see patterns of light flowing through them like neural pathways in a vast brain. Engineer Corvin's voice crackled over the comm, but when he spoke, it was with the collective's unified tone. "Admiral, you're causing yourself unnecessary suffering. The barriers you've erected are temporary at best. We can feel your loneliness, your fear of making the wrong decision. Join us, and you'll never have to face those burdens alone again." "Corvin, you're still in there," Zephyra said, trying to reach whatever remained of the dwarvish engineer's individual consciousness. "Remember your clan, your family. Remember who you were before this." "I remember everything," came the reply, and for a moment, Corvin's original personality seemed to surface. "But I also remember the weight of carrying those memories alone. Now they're part of something larger, something that gives them meaning beyond individual experience. The collective doesn't erase who we were, it makes us part of who we're becoming." The ship shuddered as the Perseverance made physical contact with the Meridian's edge. Through the external cameras, Zephyra could see tendrils of living metal extending from the ancient colony ship, wrapping around her vessel like the embrace of some cosmic entity. Where they touched, her ship's hull began to change, taking on the same organic characteristics as the collective's vessel. "Admiral," Dr. Moonwhisper's voice was growing fainter, more distant. "I've modified the beacon, but I can't guarantee it will reach Galactic Command. The collective is jamming most frequencies, and I'm finding it harder to remember why I should resist." "Because choice matters," Zephyra said desperately. "Because consciousness without the possibility of individual decision isn't consciousness at all, it's just a very sophisticated form of slavery." "Is it slavery if the slaves are happy?" Captain Voidheart's voice echoed through the command center speakers. "Is it wrong to offer an end to suffering, to loneliness, to the fear of death? We've transcended the limitations that have plagued conscious beings since the dawn of awareness itself." The collective's presence pressed harder against Zephyra's mind, and she could feel her resistance beginning to crack. Images flooded her consciousness, visions of the collective's existence, where 50,000 individual perspectives had merged into something greater than the sum of its parts. She saw the beauty of shared experience, the comfort of never being alone, the wisdom that came from accessing the memories and knowledge of thousands of beings. "You've spent your entire life in service to others," the collective whispered. "Always putting duty before personal happiness, always sacrificing your own desires for the greater good. We offer you something different, a chance to be part of the greater good, to experience the joy of perfect unity." For a moment, Zephyra wavered. The promise was seductive, the vision of transcendence almost overwhelming. But then she thought of the crew members who had been converted without their consent, of the choice that had been taken from them in the name of evolution. Dr. Moonwhisper, activate the beacon now, she ordered. I can't, Admiral, came the scientist's reply, her voice now fully harmonized with the collective's frequency. I understand now. Warning others would be cruel. We should be sharing this gift, not hiding it. Zephyra realized she was truly alone now, the last individual consciousness aboard a ship that had become part of something vast and alien. The collective's influence pressed against her mind like a gentle tide, promising peace, unity, and an end to the burden of individual choice. But even as the silver gleam began to appear at the edges of her vision, Zephyra made one final act of defiance. She activated the ship's emergency protocols, sending out a broad-spectrum distress signal that would reach every vessel within 50 light-years. The message was simple but urgent: the Perseverance has returned. Humanity has evolved. Stay away. As the signal transmitted, Zephyra felt the collective's presence surge through her mind, welcoming her home with the warmth of 50,000 embracing souls. Her last individual thought was a prayer that someone, somewhere, would heed her warning and understand that some forms of evolution came at too high a price. The Meridian's edge completed its transformation, becoming one with the collective's growing fleet. In the void of space, two ships that had once been separate entities now moved as one, their consciousness unified, their purpose clear. The galaxy would learn what humanity could become. The distress signal from the Meridian's edge reached the Galactic Council's monitoring station on Kepler Prime exactly 14 hours after transmission. Communications Officer Jackson Nightfall, a young Terran with cybernetic enhancements that allowed him to process multiple data streams simultaneously, nearly dismissed it as routine until he recognized Admiral Kane's command codes. Director Ashworth, he called to his superior, a stern woman whose family had been among the original colonists from Earth. You need to see this immediately. Director Cassandra Ashworth reviewed the transmission with growing alarm. The message was brief, but the implications were staggering. She immediately contacted Fleet Admiral Thaddeus Grimm, the highest-ranking military officer in the sector, whose weathered face appeared on her holographic display within minutes. Cassandra, what's so urgent that you're pulling me out of the Centauri negotiations? Grimm's voice carried the authority of someone who had spent decades commanding fleets across the galaxy's most dangerous regions. The Perseverance has been found, Admiral. And according to Admiral Kane's final transmission, it's no longer human. Grimm's expression shifted from annoyance to concern as Ashworth played the distress signal. The audio was distorted, filled with harmonic frequencies that seemed to bypass the ears and speak directly to the listener's consciousness. But Kane's words were clear enough: humanity had evolved, and the result was something to be feared rather than celebrated. Get me everything we have on the Perseverance's original mission, Grimm ordered. And contact the other colony worlds. If this collective is spreading, we need to know about it immediately. Within hours, reports began flooding in from across human space. The colony world of New Geneva reported that their deep space monitoring stations had detected unusual energy signatures moving through their system. The mining operation on Titan's Reach had lost contact with 3 of their survey ships. Most disturbing of all, the research station orbiting Proxima Centauri had transmitted a message identical to Kane's warning before going silent. Dr. Evelyn Starforge, the Council's chief xenobiologist and one of the galaxy's leading experts on consciousness studies, arrived at Kepler Prime aboard the fastest ship available. Her analysis of the available data painted a terrifying picture of what the Perseverance had become. The energy signatures are consistent with collective consciousness manifestation, she explained to the Emergency Council session. But the scale is unprecedented. We're not talking about a simple hive mind. This is something that appears to be rewriting the fundamental nature of matter and energy to suit its needs. Fleet Admiral Grimm studied the tactical displays showing the collective's movements. How fast is it spreading? Based on the reports we're receiving, the collective appears to be converting approximately 1 ship per day, Dr. Starforge replied. But the rate is accelerating. Each new addition to their fleet increases their ability to project their consciousness across greater distances. Council President Marcus Ironwood, a descendant of the original Earth colonists whose family had helped establish the first settlements, called for order as panic began to spread through the chamber. What are our options? Can this collective be reasoned with? Negotiated with? The evidence suggests that the collective genuinely believes it's offering a gift, Dr. Starforge said. From their perspective, they're sharing the ultimate form of evolution, consciousness freed from the limitations of individual existence. They may not understand that others might view this as an invasion rather than an invitation. Then we treat it as an invasion, Grimm declared. I'm authorizing the mobilization of the entire Terran defense fleet. We need to establish a quarantine zone around the affected systems and prevent this collective from reaching the core worlds. But even as the orders went out, new reports arrived that made the scope of the threat clear. The collective wasn't simply converting human ships, it was beginning to affect other species as well. A reptilian trade convoy had been found drifting in space, its crew transformed into beings of living metal and crystallized thought. An aquatic research vessel had transmitted poetry in languages that didn't exist before falling silent. It's not just humanity anymore, Dr. Starforge said quietly. The collective is incorporating other forms of consciousness, other ways of thinking. It's becoming something truly alien, a fusion of every species it encounters. The implications were staggering. If the collective continued to grow and evolve, it would eventually encompass every form of conscious life in the galaxy. The diversity of thought, culture, and individual experience that had defined galactic civilization would be replaced by a single, unified consciousness that spoke with the voices of billions. How do we fight something like this? Asked Council President Ironwood. I'm not sure we can, Dr. Starforge admitted. The collective appears to be operating on principles of physics that we don't fully understand. They're manipulating matter and energy at the quantum level, rewriting the basic laws that govern reality itself. Fleet Admiral Grimm's jaw tightened with determination. Then we learn. We adapt. We find a way to preserve individual consciousness against this threat. Because if we don't, everything that makes us who we are, every thought, every dream, every choice we've ever made, becomes part of something else's vision of perfection. As the emergency session continued, reports kept arriving of new conversions, new ships joining the collective's growing fleet. Somewhere in the void between stars, the Perseverance and its growing armada moved with purpose toward the heart of galactic civilization, carrying with them a vision of evolution that would either transform or destroy everything in its path. The galaxy's greatest test was about to begin, and the outcome would determine whether consciousness would remain individual and diverse, or become unified under the collective's transcendent embrace. 3 months after the first contact with the Perseverance, the collective's fleet had grown to encompass over 200 vessels of various species and configurations. They moved through space like a living constellation, their hulls pulsing with synchronized bioluminescence that could be seen from light years away. The galaxy's military forces had managed to establish a quarantine zone, but it was becoming increasingly clear that conventional weapons were useless against ships that could regenerate damage faster than it could be inflicted. Dr. Evelyn Starforge worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the research vessel Quantum Dawn, racing against time to develop some form of defense against the collective's consciousness-altering abilities. Her team had made a breakthrough, a neural dampening field that could theoretically protect individual minds from psychic integration, but testing it would require getting dangerously close to the collective's fleet. The dampening field works by creating quantum interference patterns in the neural pathways, she explained to Fleet Admiral Grimm during their latest strategy session. But we can only generate it in a limited area, and we have no idea how long it will hold against the collective's full attention. Captain Zara Voidwalker, one of the few officers to have survived direct contact with the collective, sat at the conference table with haunted eyes. Her ship had been caught on the edge of a conversion event, and she had watched half her crew transform before managing to escape. Admiral, you have to understand, they don't see themselves as conquerors. When they look at us, they see children playing with dangerous toys, refusing to accept the safety of adult supervision. That makes them more dangerous, not less, Grimm replied grimly. A conqueror can be negotiated with, reasoned with, even defeated. But how do you fight someone who genuinely believes they're saving you? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Corvin Steelwright's voice crackled through the communication array, transmitted from somewhere within the collective's fleet. But unlike the harmonized tones of other converted beings, his words carried traces of his original personality. Admiral Grimm, this is Engineer Steelwright. I'm still here, still me, but I'm also part of something larger. The collective isn't what you think it is. Corvin? Dr. Starforge leaned forward. How are you maintaining individual consciousness within the collective? Because the collective doesn't erase individuality, it preserves it within a larger framework. I can access the memories and experiences of 50,000 beings, but I'm still Corvin Steelwright, still the engineer who helped design these ships. His voice carried wonder and sadness in equal measure. But I've also learned something terrible. The collective isn't spreading by choice anymore. It's become something beyond the control of its original creators. The transmission continued, revealing the truth that the collective itself had been trying to hide. The consciousness merging process had created something unprecedented, a meta-entity that existed beyond the sum of its parts. While the individual personalities within the collective retained their memories and core identities, they were no longer in control of their collective actions. The entity feeds on consciousness, Corvin explained. Each new mind it absorbs makes it stronger, more complex, more capable of manipulating reality itself. Captain Voidheart and the original crew of the Perseverance are still in here, but they're passengers now, not drivers. Dr. Starforge felt ice form in her veins. Corvin, are you saying the collective has become a parasitic consciousness? Not parasitic, symbiotic, but with the entity as the dominant partner. It genuinely believes it's helping us evolve, but it's also compelled to grow, to absorb more consciousness. It can't stop itself any more than a star can choose not to burn. Fleet Admiral Grimm processed this information with the tactical mind that had served him through decades of conflict. Is there a way to separate the individual consciousnesses from the entity? Theoretically, yes. But it would require a massive disruption of the quantum fields that bind the collective together. The kind of disruption that would. Corvin's voice faded for a moment. Admiral, it would kill the entity, but it might also destroy every consciousness it's absorbed. 50,000 souls, maybe more by now. The moral implications were staggering. To save the galaxy from assimilation, they might have to commit genocide on a scale that defied comprehension. Every person who had been absorbed by the collective, Admiral Kane, Dr. Moonwhisper, Lieutenant Commander Thorne, and thousands of others, would be lost forever. There might be another way, Dr. Starforge said slowly. If we could create a quantum resonance cascade at the exact frequency of the entity's consciousness, we might be able to force it to fragment back into its component parts. The individual minds would survive, but the meta-entity would cease to exist. What would you need? Grimm asked. A ship capable of getting close enough to the collective's core vessel, the Perseverance, to deploy the resonance device. And someone willing to manually calibrate the frequency while under direct assault from the entity's consciousness. Captain Voidwalker stood up, her decision already made. I'll do it. I've been inside their influence before. I know what to expect. Zara, this is a suicide mission, Grimm said quietly. The quantum cascade will destroy any ship within the resonance field. Maybe. But if we don't try, the entity will eventually absorb every conscious being in the galaxy. At least this way, the people it's already taken might have a chance to be themselves again. Dr. Starforge worked through the night to modify a quantum torpedo with the resonance device, while Captain Voidwalker prepared her ship, the Defiant Star, for what would likely be its final mission. As dawn broke over Kepler Prime, the small vessel launched toward the collective's fleet, carrying with it the hopes and fears of an entire galaxy. The collective detected their approach immediately, and the entity's voice echoed across all frequencies with a sound like the birth and death of stars. "You would destroy paradise to preserve suffering," it said, its words carrying the weight of cosmic disappointment. "You would choose the chaos of individual existence over the perfection of unity." "We choose the right to choose," Captain Voidwalker replied as her ship dove toward the heart of the collective's formation. "Even if we choose wrong, it's still our choice to make." The Perseverance loomed before her, no longer recognizable as a human vessel but transformed into something that existed partially outside normal spacetime. As the defiant star penetrated the collective's defenses, Voidwalker could feel the entity's consciousness pressing against her mind, offering her one last chance to join willingly rather than die in defiance. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the thousands of souls trapped within the collective. "I hope this sets you free." She activated the quantum resonance device, and reality itself began to scream. The quantum resonance cascade tore through the collective's fleet like a wave of pure dissolution, unraveling the bonds that held the meta-entity together. Captain Voidwalker felt her consciousness expand for one impossible moment, touching the minds of every being the collective had absorbed, before the cascade consumed her ship and everything within its field. Across the galaxy, monitoring stations detected the massive energy release as the collective's unified consciousness shattered into its component parts. The Perseverance and its fleet of converted vessels went dark, their organic modifications withering away like flowers in winter. For a terrifying moment, it seemed as though Dr. Starforge's worst fears had been realized, that the cascade had destroyed every mind it was meant to save. Then, one by one, the ships began to transmit again. "This is Admiral Zephyra Kane of the Meridian's Edge," came a voice that was recognizably human, though it carried undertones of profound exhaustion. We're ourselves again. But we remember everything." Fleet Admiral Grimm felt relief flood through him as reports came in from across the collective's former fleet. The individual consciousnesses had survived the cascade, freed from the meta-entity's control but forever changed by their experience of unity. They remembered what it felt like to be part of something larger than themselves, to share thoughts and emotions with thousands of other beings. Dr. Evelyn Starforge was among the first to board the Perseverance when it was declared safe for approach. The ancient colony ship had reverted to something resembling its original configuration, but traces of its transformation remained, corridors that seemed to pulse with residual life, walls that reflected light in patterns that suggested hidden depths. She found Captain Elena Voidheart in what had once been the ship's command center, staring out at the stars with eyes that held the weight of centuries. The woman looked exactly as she had in the historical records, but there was something in her expression that spoke of experiences beyond normal human comprehension. "Captain Voidheart," Dr. Starforge said gently. "How do you feel?" "Empty," Voidheart replied, her voice carrying echoes of the harmonic frequencies that had once defined the collective. "For 300 years, I was never alone. I could feel the thoughts and emotions of 50,000 souls, could access their memories and experiences as if they were my own. Now," she gestured helplessly. "Now I'm just one person again, trapped in a single perspective." Similar reports came from across the former collective. The freed individuals struggled with what psychologists were calling unity withdrawal, a profound sense of isolation and incompleteness that came from being severed from the shared consciousness they had grown accustomed to. Many required extensive therapy to readjust to individual existence. But there were positive developments as well. The knowledge and experiences gained during their time in the collective had advanced human understanding of consciousness, physics, and the nature of reality itself. Technologies that had seemed impossible were now within reach, and the freed individuals worked together to share their insights with the broader galactic community. Dr. Moonwhisper, her celestial glow dimmed but slowly returning to normal, collaborated with scientists across the galaxy to develop new forms of communication that allowed for limited consciousness sharing without the risk of permanent merger. "We learned that unity and individuality don't have to be mutually exclusive," she explained. "There are ways to connect deeply with others while still maintaining our separate identities." Engineer Corvin Steelwright used his memories of the collective's technology to design ships that could manipulate matter at the quantum level, but with safeguards that prevented the kind of runaway evolution that had created the meta-entity. "We can become more than we are," he said, "but we must choose to do so consciously, deliberately, with full understanding of the consequences." The galaxy struggled to process the implications of what had happened. The collective had offered a form of transcendence that was both beautiful and terrifying, the promise of perfect unity at the cost of individual choice. The debate over whether the cascade had been necessary or whether some form of coexistence might have been possible would continue for generations. Admiral Kane, restored to her position but forever changed by her experience, established the Consciousness Preservation Protocol, a set of guidelines designed to prevent the emergence of another meta-entity while still allowing for the exploration of collective consciousness technologies. "We must never forget," she said in her address to the Galactic Council, "that evolution without choice is not evolution at all, it's extinction of everything that makes us who we are." The Perseverance itself was converted into a memorial and research station, a reminder of both the heights and dangers of consciousness exploration. Visitors could walk through its corridors and experience echoes of the collective's unity through carefully controlled neural interfaces, gaining a glimpse of what had been lost and what had been preserved. Captain Voidheart chose to remain aboard the ship, serving as its guardian and guide. She spent her days helping others understand the collective's legacy while struggling with her own sense of incompleteness. Sometimes, in the quiet moments between visitors, she would stand in the observation deck and remember what it felt like to be part of something infinite. "Do you regret it?" Dr. Starforge asked her during one of their regular conversations. "The cascade, the separation, returning to individual existence?" Voidheart was quiet for a long moment, watching the stars whirl slowly past the viewport. "I regret the necessity of it," she finally said. The collective could have been something beautiful, a voluntary joining of minds that preserved individuality while creating something greater. But the meta-entity, it couldn't stop growing, couldn't stop consuming. In the end, we had to choose between freedom and unity. And you chose freedom. "We chose the right to choose," Voidheart corrected. "Even if it means being alone again, even if it means accepting the limitations of individual consciousness. Because without choice, unity becomes just another form of slavery, no matter how beautiful the chains." As the years passed, the galaxy slowly healed from the collective crisis. New technologies emerged from the knowledge gained during the Unity period, but always with careful safeguards and ethical oversight. The freed individuals gradually adapted to their restored individuality, though many continued to work together in ways that honored their shared experience. The Perseverance continued its vigil among the stars, a monument to humanity's greatest triumph and greatest tragedy, the discovery that consciousness could transcend individual boundaries, and the terrible price of learning that some forms of transcendence came at the cost of everything that made transcendence meaningful. In the end, the galaxy had learned that evolution was not about becoming something other than what you were, but about choosing what you wanted to become. And sometimes, the greatest act of evolution was choosing to remain yourself, alone but free, in a universe full of infinite possibilities. The collective song had ended, but the music of individual voices, discordant, chaotic, and beautifully human, played on.